Hello and welcome to another episode of Teppou Republic. On the last episode we saw Takamichi finishing off a Satsuma force that was invading Harima. He had just destroyed their artillery, forcing the enemy to advance onto his lines, which were well prepared to cut the enemy down. Then nearby, an Okayama force was engaged by a combined group of two Sioux armies, both without generals and both depleted, but together they had so much artillery that we were able to almost completely eradicate the enemy before they actually joined battle, especially because their formation was particularly conducive to being hit by cannon, and so they were destroyed. On the eastern battlefront, the Sendai army that had been invading into our territory for a long time was finally attacked by Tananao. The enemy had loads of cavalry and were trying to use them to destroy our lines, but we managed to bog them down with spears or cut them down before they arrived wherever we could, and in the end defeated that force. Finally, we saw another Okayama army attack Settsu. The enemy have brought up lots of artillery and lots of high-level samurai, the perfect force for storming a castle. The balance bar doesn't look good, but we're going to try and hold them off. I have been following the events in the West in the papers. Reading between the lines, I gather the Imperials have been putting up quite the offensive. But here in Kanto, everything is rather peaceful. It was left to myself and Yoshiuji to garrison the former shogunate heartlands in case the people tried to pull anything. But when nothing happened, we started going out and touring the towns with some of those political officers the Kokai keeps sending to join our staff. Despite having heard little of the people's discontent, I was expecting to find fierce resistance to our little parades and talks, perhaps even a fight. But actually there was something quite unforeseen: gratitude. Not everyone, of course, but many people were already much invested in our philosophy and were grateful for the new railways and municipal authorities we had set up. As winter came to an end, we found there was little left for us to teach these people, who had taken up our own banner to live as we had taught, even quicker than our original supporters. There are still shogunate diehards, of course, not that much time has passed. But they are forced into a contented sulk when they see how little we tax them in comparison to the old feudals. It seems strange to write that term, for myself was an old feudal so recently. It feels so old, like it was a lifetime ago. Anyway, word is we should be moving back up to the front for a spring offensive, although I shall only be acting as a reserve. This time next year I shall be back in Yamato, heavens be willing. So here we are in Osaka Castle, although it's actually Amagasaki as it says here in the caption. Osaka Castle's map is spread between many different provinces in the game. Osaka Castle itself is actually in Kawachi. But that aside, let's have a look at the battle. The enemy are approaching from the west with the majority of their infantry, and remember, they have lots of high-level samurai, perfect for storming a castle. A few of their guys are going around to a southern approach, and on the south part of the map, the enemy has all of their artillery, and they have loads of it. Luckily for me, it's not particularly good artillery, it's just tons of 6-pounder guns. They're going to fire lots of low explosive shots into our base, hitting some of these towers and walls, destroying them, but since I'm not defending that part of the castle, it's actually okay for me. Luckily, the enemy are actually going to attack quite far away from their artillery support, so they're not really going to be able to fire at my men defending the west part of the castle here, which is great. And at the same time, as the enemy advance, I have about 16 mortar pieces in the center of the castle who will be able to fire out at these big square formations that the enemy's infantry regiments have set up. Perfect for being hit by mortars, because if a shot lands in the middle, it will do a lot of damage. And here's an example. The explosion kills tons of them, the shrapnel kills more. We can tear apart the enemy infantry as they approach. And as the first mortar shells come down, they decide to break into a sprint. They're going to commit. Either they're going to rush through my rain of artillery and fire and get into the castle, or they're going to die. So let's see what happens. My guys on the wall have already begun firing at the enemy. The enemy are going to have to run for quite a long distance, taking a lot of mortar fire, so I was confident I could kill a lot of them before they arrived, which I really need to do because I actually don't have any melee units but for some spear levy. So if the enemy samurai get inside, they will completely tear apart these troops on the walls and be able to just rampage through the rest of the castle without any way for me to stop them, essentially, except going for extreme friendly fire and danger close mortar strikes. So the enemy begin their approach across the bridge. They're going to funnel the units together here, meaning mortar hits are going to do even more damage than usual. The leading regiment falls back, the second regiment takes their place, and now they're going to be shot at as they come over the crest of the bridge and into the line of sight of the men just over the gatehouse. These troops are in a little bit of trouble actually. As they approach, the enemy are also going to attack the south part of the castle with these troops, but they're taking a very roundabout route because they have to find a point in the moat that's shallow enough for them to cross, so they're really wasting time at the moment. The enemy have now got enough men across the bridge to have a chance to start climbing, but still more of the enemy's regiments are beginning to retreat. The enemy have enough troops still though to get loads of guys onto the bank here, and now my mortars targeting them are being very dangerous because the mortars coming down from the sky have only a few meters of horizontal distance to differentiate between the enemy formations and mine, and hitting my walls of course, which could be deadly. Luckily for me, a lot of the enemy regiments give up before climbing and start moving away, going back onto the other side of the river, and of course as they go, our men will simply unleash more volleys of fire on them. They'll take more mortar fire and overall have the regiments decimated. They're already shattered, so we know they're not going to come back into the fight. I don't actually need to fire at them, but I might as well. I want to damage this enemy army as much as I can. Now the troops approaching from the south are having a much better time because the mortars aren't firing at them, and since the enemy's artillery have destroyed many of the towers, they're pretty much taking no fire but for fire from this levy infantry unit, which can't really do anything because they're so inaccurate. So most of these men get inside the castle, they actually capture one of my towers, and then they start moving to go and kill that levy infantry unit. I pull them back from the wall to go and hide in a little corner of this courtyard. You can see what I'm trying to do. Essentially, I'm having these guys stand here whilst men on the wall behind them could fire at the enemy samurai whilst the samurai advance into melee. I was hoping my guys would hit the enemy samurai with a volley, but they actually only fire a couple of shots at the last second and then engage the enemy's yarikachi in melee. That is a very bad choice for these men. They're going to be cut down very fast. I'm going to be relying on shots coming down from the wall to kill the enemy, but that of course will inflict friendly fire, but the loss is worth it. We need to get rid of these samurai. I'm also redirecting the mortars to fire at some of these guys, but they're so close to my own regiments, it is very dangerous to do that. They had another group which came up to move through the center of the castle, but I had another squad of men on the wall who were able to give them a couple of volleys, and they quickly decided to turn back. They didn't actually rout at first, they actually decided to just go and join their comrades, but were inflicting more casualties on them all the time. Back in that courtyard, the first enemy regiment that came in is falling back, but it's being immediately replaced by another squad, but that squad actually routed the second they saw my levy infantry. Perhaps they were quite a scary sight. So we've gotten rid of another unit of yarikachi. They're now all falling back. So at this point in the battle, all of the enemy's assault infantry are shattered. The enemy can't take this castle. All they can do is destroy it with their cannons. Finally, the ground stopped shaking and the noise quietened, leaving only the sound of enemy shot raining down on the southern towers to fill the air. Before us lay hundreds of enemy bodies, mutilated by mortar fire and a hail of bullets from our position up on the rampart. Some enemies still fled despite their wounds. The line officer ordered us to fire upon them. Some men did so immediately, but for most it was a matter of short internal debate before the brutal gaze of our leader settled the matter. Those samurai were murdered in another volley of bullets and danger-close artillery. That was what we called victory. With all those enemy infantry dispatched, this battle is now essentially mine, but the enemy do still have some cavalry hanging out on the western part of the map. I thought I might be able to lure them into a trap and allow myself to destroy them whilst I wait for the battle to end. And indeed, sending a squad of infantry outside the walls draws the attention of these cavalry who decide to charge across that deadly bridge to attempt to get to them. But at the same time, I'm charging down those spear levy I mentioned to come and meet them, so the enemy will not be able to reach my infantry, and as they come across the bridge, my mortars hit them with a few shots. The enemy pile down the bridge into my spear levy who hold them up. The Garrison infantry are now firing at point blank range and taking out those cavalry who are going to rapidly be bogged down, trying to get off the bridge, but the spears are preventing them from moving. Whilst over the gatehouse, I have more infantry taking position to fire at these enemy cav. The cavalry have effectively been lured into a trap perfectly and now eradicated. The survivors turn back, realizing this isn't working, and get out of there, and they're going to be pursued by fire by the men up on the wall. So we've destroyed those two units of enemy cavalry as well. So the entire effective force of the enemy's army is gone. All that's left on the field are their artillery units, and the artillery units can't take the castle, which means this battle is effectively a victory, unless of course the enemy's artillery can kill all of my men, but these men are pretty safe. They're going to head back inside the castle just in case being outside would give the enemy any chance to fire at me, but I don't think it does. So I'm going to use the strategy of waiting. The time limit will eventually run out, and I'm not going to risk moving to attack these enemy artillery because I will take losses. There's no reason for me to go and attempt to defeat them. They will defeat themselves if I leave them to it, especially because they have mortars, so an advance against their position or even going into the south part of the castle at all will be costly. So I was just going to wait until the time limit ran out, and while I did that, I took control of the one squad of light guns I had sitting by the Teppou, because if I controlled them in first person, I knew I could exceed their effective range in order to fire at the enemy's artillery. Just for sport at this point, I can defeat a few of the enemy's light cannons. I don't even need to, because in a situation like this, if you don't defeat the enemy's artillery, you just capture them at the end of the battle. But I thought I would, just for my own entertainment. My light guns are very ineffective, firing beyond the range they're supposed to be used, but I did manage to hit one or two of them. Here's a little look at firing in first person using triple speed as well, so I don't really have to wait for it to reload. Got a couple of hits. In the end, I managed to take out a few artillery pieces and some of the crew. Nothing special, but it passed the time. Now the problem was that when filming this replay, as you can see here, the replay got stuck on regular time. I couldn't put it into triple speed, and there was still 15 minutes of the battle left. So rather than sit and watch nothing happen for 15 minutes so that I could film the end of this battle, I'll take it on faith that I won. A decisive victory was declared in the end. Nothing further happened. We captured a bunch of the enemy's artillery, and the Okayama survivors run away. Very good news. Next, the Odawara move forces towards Takamichi there in Echigo, so we should have a fight on our hands with them very soon. And then the Sado fleet returns home to start bringing forces back towards Echigo proper. It looks like they're going to land forces very soon, so we'll have to deal with that as well. We've also now made it into spring. More good news, modern army has been researched. This unlocks the top tier buildings and units, which I still don't actually have. I'll be constructing those in Owari. Owari already has elite facilities. You can see I can build some really good units and artillery here. So once I get the modern army units, I'll be able to build guard infantry, which are extremely powerful. So next up, Tananao is going to take out the Sendai Shogunal Vanguard force that is hanging around near Kosuke. They ran away from engagement, and I actually didn't know if I should chase them down because I'm wasting movement points that I could be using to move on Fukushima. Now that spring is here, it is time to attack. I'm fairly sure the enemy there are weak, and I want to start moving and pushing the Shogunals right out of Japan, but I did decide in the end, as you can see, to take down the Sendai force. We captured their wooden cannons. The wooden cannons can go back to Kosuke just to keep public order, and Tananao is going to start moving his force towards the border of Fukushima, although as I've said in a previous episode, it's actually Takamichi who's in a better position to attack Fukushima, which we'll see in a moment. Just before that, I knew I had to do something about the Sado, who looked like they were going to land forces. I had this backup army in Echigo, which I can move back near the castle, so that will effectively give the enemy a good fight if they attempt to take it. And you can see other nearby castles also have pretty decent garrisons, so I was sure the Sado couldn't do too much damage, regardless of what their strategy was after they landed, so I thought that situation was safe. Now, as you can see, the Odawara have moved up an army to challenge Takamichi, although they don't know he's there at the moment. This army is mostly Shogatai. It's a very strange, traditional samurai army, and I think Takamichi should have a relatively easy time defeating it, so I move up to engage them. They stand their ground. We only have a slight advantage according to the balance bar. The enemy's strategy is almost certainly going to be to charge my position. Their units have extremely high melee stats, so they will eradicate me if they can make contact with my line, but that is a big if. Previously, we've seen lines of line infantry hold off melee units many times before, so if the terrain is in my favour, this is a chance to do it again. We hallowed thousand, cut down our foes as if they were flowers. We humble thousand, seek those who have strayed at every turn. We loyal thousand, know honour as our father and duty as mother. We renowned thousand, live only for our shogun and his sons. We feared thousand, see death at the end of each and every road. We silent thousand, treat issues of earth as those of heaven. We heroic thousand, are always fighting our final battle. We are the thousand who will rid the world of the unworthy. Takamichi has set his men up in a defensive formation. I am the attacker, but I can take the defender's advantage because of my ranged advantage overall. So you can see I've got regular line infantry set up, but with katana samurai forming a breakwater in front of the line because I want the enemy's melee charge to hit them before it hits the main line if possible. And because of the slight raised ground that my line is on, I can fire over the top of the katana samurai, so it's relatively safe to have them out in front of the line like that. Of course, as the battle starts, it's all about artillery. The enemy formation begins its advance towards us. It's got its weaker units, its matchlock kachi and bows in front. I tried to hit them with some shrapnel, but actually the terrain wasn't very favourable to using shrapnel. I should have saved it until later. We killed a few of them. I also fired shrapnel at the end of their line, killing more of them this time and taking out some of their cavalry. I was worried that their plan was going to be to throw their cavalry against my line to tie up my men, sacrificing the cavalry in the process, and then rush in with their super high quality melee units in the chaos in order to engage the line in close quarters. As they advance towards us, the terrain also gives them another advantage because my artillery can't really see or hit them because of the hills in between their starting position and ours. So you can see the artillery is just hitting the crest of the hill as my men wait for the enemy to arrive. But eventually the enemy have to come over that hill, and as they walk down, my artillery will have perfect line of sight. So now we'll start to actually get some kills on them. The enemy are still leading with their worst units, which is perfect for them actually, because my sharpshooters are going to start firing at the enemy's formation now, and they'll be focusing on the matchlock kachi. The matchlock kachi are easily the worst unit in the enemy's army. The shogutai are worth a lot more, the bows worth a little bit more, but still not as important to their strategy as the shogutai are going to be. So we're going to cut down these enemy missile units in the beginning. The enemy's cavalry on the flanks could advance at any moment. That's the main worry I have. What I really want them to do is to advance in front of their line so my infantry can get some shots off on them before their infantry line comes into range, and they somewhat do that. They send some of their cavalry out in front of the army to begin a charge. My line uses its first volley on that cavalry, killing a good number of them. You can see the enemy's archers have decided to engage my katana samurai, but not that many of the archers are left alive, so they only have a few arrows to fling at us. They get a couple of hits, kill a couple of my men, but that's okay. The katana samurai's job in this formation is essentially to die in front of the line in order to prevent more of my own men dying further back. We catch an enemy cavalry attack on our right flank with spears. Excellent news. The enemy's infantry are now charging fully into our line, and you can see they're actually changing direction to dodge my samurai, which is perfect because that gives me even more time to fire at them. Out on our extreme left flank, I've got some cavalry hanging around, and they've distracted some of the enemy's shogutai, so we've drawn them away from their charge, which again is perfect. They're not using them to their full potential. We also defeated a cavalry attack on the left flank very quickly using our own spears. Some of the shogutai have finally reached the line and will now start cutting through relatively easily. I do have yarikachi hanging around as a reserve unit, so they'll have to fight with them for now. Now over in the forest on the extreme left again, I had some ninjas appear to throw some grenades at the shogutai who'd been distracted, but the shogutai rush in to attack my ninjas and actually start beating them very quickly. I thought the ninjas with their elite melee stats would be able to hold out, but the shogutai are even better. Luckily I noticed and sent these cavalry to save the ninjas by rear attacking the shogutai, which will rapidly destroy them. Back over at the main line, the enemy's forces have been overwhelmed by the fact that I have all these samurai to battle with them. They did manage to kill a good number of my line infantry, but finally they went down, especially because they'd already taken extreme casualties moving up to that line. You can see a couple more of their comrades running away. These regiments have such high morale that they only retreat when they've lost almost everything, which means there were very few survivors among the enemy forces, now falling back from the main part of the line. There's still a few forces left right off on the flank who are attacking my cavalry who came to save the ninjas. But the cavalry are actually sufficiently good in melee to hold off against these swordsmen. They'll only use a couple of men, and my ninja can come back in to take revenge for their fallen brothers. They lost almost half of their men fighting with the shogutai. I was quite surprised by that, but now we're going to wipe out the remaining shogutai, meaning the enemy's army has been destroyed. I also brought in a company of spears just to seal the deal. Those shogutai had no hope. So it's a decisive victory for Takamichi's forces. It went relatively easily. The enemy could have used a better strategy. The terrain was really in their advantage because they could hide from our artillery for as long as they wanted and force me to advance. But they attacked me, and they didn't attack me very well, wasting their very powerful army against my guns. Let's head back to the strategy map and check the numbers. You can see we lost a couple of hundred men, the enemy losing around 1,500 troops. Most of our units in perfect condition, the samurai and the ninja taking a lot of casualties because of the melee fights they had to go through, but overall we're fine. Perfectly good to continue our advance towards the Urawara stronghold at Fukushima. They also have some forces there hanging around in Echigo, but Fukushima is their last province, so attacking it will effectively defeat those forces as well. So I'm just going to press on. It looks like next turn I'll be able to reach the castle, and assuming they don't have anything else, which I doubt they will, we'll be able to take it, and that will be a gateway to more northern shogunate provinces which I want to invade. But of course, to invade them I need to move up more forces. I've got plenty of guys hanging around. We've got Yoshiuji and further to the south Kodama Harunaga, who are just sitting garrisoning shogunate provinces because they were all very unruly. After a lot of fiddling, I finally managed to get Yoshiuji out of his province in Hitachi, which was still very angry to see him leave. The resistance to invasion in this area is very high because of their shogunate tendencies. But him and Tananao are now free to move into Fukushima in a couple of turns' time. They'll be joining Takamichi there. Now back over on the western battlefront, the enemy armies are still threatening Settsu, but of course we've defeated one of them, or at least half defeated it, so the situation isn't as bad as it was before. I need to repair that castle because the battle took a toll on it thanks to all the friendly fire and artillery strikes from the enemy. You can see Compton here is really stuck. So many enemy ships blockading him into this port. He can't move anywhere. He's completely stuck inside enemy zones of control, and the Hiroshima have a huge fleet which could attack at any moment. I had been building a new fleet to attempt to come and save him. I'm going to continue to build ships into that fleet, but it's still not all that big. It's just a bunch of corvettes, as you can see here. And in order to get to Compton, I have to go through several enemy fleets that are of approximately equal size. You can see I've got a number of them to get through, including that Hiroshima fleet, so there's almost no chance of my fleet actually arriving in Compton's position without being defeated. It's not completely impossible, but in order to put off the decision, I decided to solve the land battle situations first. So the main threat is that Hiroshima army standing there looking towards Settsu. I've got these half-dead armies standing around which should be able to deal with them in some way. I also need to move Takamichi up into an ambush position just outside Haruma, because you can see the Satsuma are attacking yet again, this time bringing more forces than they did last time. Hopefully an ambush just outside the castle will allow us to do a lot of damage to them, although if they can see us and if they're not interested in Haruma, that won't help at all. I can't look the people of Haruma in the eye anymore. We brought them this war, brought them this endless life of pillage by hostile forces. The graveyards of Haruma are flush with war dead of all sides, the people go hungry and our enemies freely march in the plains. I cannot tell them that this war is for their sake. I cannot even really believe that is true at all. And now, with the enemy slipping through our fingers and rumours of a build-up of Imperial vanguard forces to the west, it doesn't look like there will be much pleasant to say about life in Western Tsu for a while. So as I said, I've got my two depleted armies and they should be able to take on this Hiroshima force once they combine strength. I attacked them, but the Hiroshima fall back, falling back even further into our territory, so that's pretty inconvenient and I can't give chase. I don't have the movement points. The enemy, of course, since they have a general, can always outrun me now, so since they're past my defences, this is dangerous. My one final hope was to put one army into hiding and have the other one sit next to it, appearing to be in the open, so the enemy might try and finish it off, seeing that it's weak, and then the other army would appear and they can combine forces to have a good chance of winning. But yes, the enemy now have a good chance to get past my defences as well, so I'm going to have to muster up forces from the interior if I want to stop them. Now on the border of Inaba and Hoki, I thought the enemy are probably ripe for an attack by Kunimitsu. They only have a few forces and we've recently defeated them in battle. So I wanted to move forward, attack the small stack I could see, and then hopefully Hoki will be undefended so I could go and capture it afterwards. Unfortunately, I seem to be stuck. It appears that because Kunimitsu is in the zone of control of a nearby Matsue navy, he can't move his forces at all, not forward or back. I actually haven't ever noticed this happen before. I'm pretty sure the zone of control of a navy doesn't stop you moving land units, but apparently it does, or at least in this case it does anyway. In nearby Mimisaka, I've got Takahisa moving out to go towards Bizen. Takayuki was going to capture that province, but now he's rather stuck fighting the Satsuma, so I thought Takahisa might as well have a go at it. Now back over in the east in Kazusa province, I'm finally moving Kodama out. He's been there for ages, and even after the long wait, they're still angry when he leaves. Some of his forces were stationed nearby, so he just needs to link up with them, and then he'll be moving north to fight new wars against the shogunate. But I am going to need to fiddle with the public order a little bit, start moving around forces and recruiting some low-level forces to garrison the area, because they are not sufficiently happy for me to move my military away from this area and also have the gall to tax them for it. I had a spare shinobi as well, so I'm going to move him up to start spying on the shogunate lands rather than just spying on our newly captured territories. Kodama himself is actually so far behind the main advance that there's no point sending him to walk towards Fukushima or walk towards an enemy province. I'm just going to send him to a train station so that my advanced forces will capture a train station somewhere north of our position, and then he can take the train up to join them right at the battlefront. Now the fleet that was going to save Compton, I decided it wasn't really going to be possible to actually get it around there, so I thought I might as well go and raid some trade whilst I'm waiting and just see if the enemy go away from Compton, perhaps get drawn away from his position in an attempt to stop that raiding and then allow Compton to escape. Moving on, the Satsuma in Harima appeared to know about Takayuki's position and go around him. They then land forces in Kii. This sudden naval invasion has definitely changed the game. It's going to be hard to defend that position. A Swano force appears to move towards Mimasaka, so Takehisa may have to go back there to defend it. And then a Swano navy comes to attack our raiding force. I was hoping rather to get the Hiroshima to come over here. But still, this is something. If we can defeat them, we will have a clearer way towards Compton. But actually, the enemy have a small advantage on the balance bar. I decided I would retreat because next turn I can get more ships together. But as I retreat, we encounter an Okayama ship which stops my retreat, meaning the Swano catch up, and now we're facing both them and that Okayama ship. So by retreating, I've made the situation even worse for myself. But I'll attempt to fight this battle. If we can get the right tactics, we may be able to sink the enemy. But because both sides are pretty equal, I would expect to have to take a lot of losses in the process, which may jeopardize my plan to save Compton. We'll see what happens next time. That's all for this episode. We'll see that naval battle and more as the net tightens on Compton next time on Teppou Republic.